it's not that he didn't have a seat. It's that he didn't bother to show up for his constituents. So they fired him. And now he just assumes we're going to vote him in.
That is Bonnie Critchley, the independent candidate for Battle River Crowfoot, who I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from as she is running against former or current conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, caught myself there, who lost his own riding of Carleton during the election and is now attempting to parachute in a spot back into Parliament by running in his very safe conservative riding. So in this video, I'm going to get to a few clips from her fantastic CBC interview, including a great analysis of the current political climate, as well as Mark Carney. Even though she is center-right, as she describes herself, I think she has an accurate analysis of what is going on. First, a quick overview here of just how we got to this point, in case you need to be caught up. So Pierre Poilievre, of course, as I said, lost his riding of Carleton by 5 percentage points to Bruce Fanjoy, the Liberal candidate. Meanwhile, Damien Carrick, was the MP of this riding of Battle River Crowfoot, won his riding with a very strong 82.8%. And Pierre Poilievre and his team saw this and thought, you know what? Let's push him out so we can get Pierre Poilievre a very safe riding where he's definitely for sure going to win. Right? We'll see. So, worth mentioning as well, Damien Carrick is now part of Upstream Strategy Group, which is a government relations PR group. But so he's got a nice cushy job now. But Pierre Poilievre really wants back into Parliament. Yet, he's going to have to deal with Bonnie Critchley, the independent candidate here. So I'm going to get to a little more on who Bonnie Critchley is and something very interesting from her About page. But first, here is her responding to a question on CBC News about Pierre Poilievre.
Tell us why you've decided to run in this by-election and run against the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, in the seat.
It really boils down to my slogan, which isn't a slogan. It's simply the truth. This is our home. This is our riding. We just had an election and we spent all that money and we elected the candidate of our choice, who promptly turned around and said, no, I don't want that mandate I asked you for. And we're spending another $2 million to vote in the angry guy from Ottawa, who doesn't know jack about this area. He may have been born in Calgary, but he's from Ottawa. He hasn't been here. He hasn't lived here. And even if he had stayed in Calgary, this is a very different area than the urban centers he's used to.
So you're mad. You don't like what Damien Carrick has done. You don't like what Pierre Poilievre has done, even though there is a long tradition in Canadian politics of backbenchers giving up their seat for the leader. You don't like this one bit.
Well, yeah, I would agree. Normally, yes. But this unseated leader it's not that he didn't have a seat. It's that he didn't bother to show up for his constituents. So they fired him. And now he just assumes we're going to vote him in when he lived in the same town as his constituents. We're 3,000 kilometers west. Do you think he's going to show up here ever?
So you don't buy it that he's running to represent this riding, to be the voice of Battle River Crowfoot in Parliament. You think this is just a path back to the House of Commons so we can get back into question period and those things?
Absolutely. We are being used, and myself and my neighbors are upset about this. We don't like our answers being assumed. And that's what's going on right now. And yes, on paper, this is a very conservative area, which is why I'm running a right of center, but centrist campaign. And I am a palatable alternative to the Conservative Party, who has sold them out.
I love Bonnie Critchley's approach here. The justified anger, the frustration with the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre after they kicked out the person that they voted in just to bring this guy in who knows nothing about the riding. They are being used. I don't even think conservative voters could argue with that. The only thing you could say is, hey, sure, they're being used, but we don't care because we want our leader to be in Parliament. Okay, you can make that argument. But these people are definitely being used. Nobody can argue against that. Pierre Poilievre has no connection to the riding. Why else is he there? He's there simply to have a seat in Parliament, obviously. So this is a 22-year-old, or I should say 22-year veteran, served as an armored crewman And upon her retirement, she was the highest ranked woman in her trade in the history of her unit. So this is somebody who has a connection to the riding. She's lived there for 10 years. This is also worth mentioning here, which I find very interesting. On her About page, she writes this. This is where the longest ballot committee comes in. So the longest ballot committee were a part actually of the riding that Pierre Poilievre lost, where there's, I forget how many, like 100 different candidates on here. And the whole point was to try and showcase the absurdity of the electoral process and the need for electoral reform. And, I think they're overall, what the longest ballot committee is doing, I think is good in terms of trying to put a spotlight on the need to change the system. But I think Bonnie Critchley makes a fantastic point here on her page, where she says, please don't, as in please don't get involved in this race. Just don't. This is our home, our riding. Please do not come here and muddy the waters further. While I'm given to understand that your goal is to push for electoral change, this is not the place. Your actions make it impossible for electors to be able to find anyone who isn't attached to a party. You are further pushing us into a party system. So because Bonnie Critchley is running as an independent, it's going to be a lot tougher for her to stand out on the ballot if there's 100 other names on the list. I think this is one case where these individuals, longest ballot committee, should not be involved. If you really want to potentially challenge Pierre Poilievre here and gain some momentum in a candidate who I think has the ability to gain momentum, it's important to not muddy the waters, as she says, with a bunch of candidates on the ballot. So that's a great point. Now, she also mentions here that, Pierre Poilievre is not your typical unseated leader. This is a point worth hammering. It's not as if Pierre Poilievre became the leader and now needs to find a seat. No, he's been the leader for a while, lost his own seat. This is a unique situation where his own riding rejected him, a conservative riding that has voted for him for years. They rejected him because of his rejection of the people living there. So to expect this individual, Pierre Poilievre, to come into a completely different riding he has no connection to, and all of a sudden speak to the needs of people there is insane. Of course, he's not going to do that. Now, the big question is, will voters in this riding prioritize the candidate over the party? Because it is a deep conservative riding, a lot of people are simply going to vote for Pierre Poilievre because he is the conservative and the conservative leader. And they're not going to even consider someone like Bonnie Critchley, who actually has an interest to fight and be a voice for the people there. So this is always the big thing that, these candidates have to overcome is, can they really stand out as an independent when so many people vote simply based on what the party is? Now, let's get to the next question.
And Mark Carney seems to be a more palatable liberal, I think, for a lot of people in Alberta. Why not look at those options? Why run independent instead?
Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Mark Carney is a progressive conservative in a liberal suit. But the reason I ran independent is two reasons. The first being that obviously I can't run for the CPC. Mm-hmm. The second being that this is Canadian politics. And the leak over from our south border of this two-party system is damaging to the Canadian polyscape. And this is also somebody can be both or one or the other, but doesn't have to stay within the team politics, because team politics is very damaging. We have to hold our own team accountable. We have to hold our own representatives accountable. And you can't just own the libs or own the cons while your representative is literally voting against your best interests. But it beats the other team. This is not the Stanley Cup. This is politics. This is people's lives. You don't like the polarization. You don't like sort of the tribalism that's emerging in politics over the last number of years. No, and that's, like I said, that's a leak over from our south border. That is not Canadian politics. We are a multi-party system for a reason. And this multi-party system is what holds our two big parties in check. There is a third reason, and it's because in this current minority government, an independent would hold just an immense amount of influence, being a swing vote, when the current formal government, excuse me, when the current formal government is short 3 seats.
I am beyond impressed with this candidate. This could have been anyone running against Pierre Poilievre, but this is somebody here who actually truly understands how the system works, the issues with the current political climate, knows that Mark Carney is a progressive conservative in a liberal suit, which is something you would normally hear someone on the left describe Mark Carney as, but here's a center-right individual who understands this as well. The importance of having an independent in her riding. So let me just break some of this down. The analysis here of how our elections have become more Americanized, I think, is bang on. People have moved to this, this is a general sense. I'm not saying this is exact, and I'm not saying we can't reverse this, but there is sort of a sense that people are beginning to simply vote by party and not based on the candidate, the riding, what each party is fighting for, the moment, who they're fighting against, how they can strategically use their vote. This is a lot how American politics operates, where people are, born a Democrat or born a Republican, and they vote that way their whole life, and they don't even think about it. That's insane. You have to be able to look at politics as these are the people that get to design how our lives operate. So it should only matter what they are fighting for. Now, as I've said before, I have voted for 4 different parties in my life, and that has changed depending on, as I said, the moment, the riding, the candidate. I voted for myself one time, so that was an obvious choice. But there are so many factors that go into a run like this. Having an independent MP right now, especially with the margin that the Liberal Party has, is incredibly valuable. Battle River Crowfoot the voters need to understand how important it is to have somebody who doesn't have to or can't have their vote whipped by a party. This is somebody here who actually truly can act independently based on what is best for her constituents. Now, one last clip from this interview, and I love her no BS approach here.
In an interview with my colleague Catherine Cullen, Pierre Poilievre suggested that he lost that seat because of his publicly stated intentions to cut the civil service, and that he was honest and upfront with what his plans were. What do you make of that reasoning as the reason why he lost the seat here in the Ottawa area and is now running in your neck of the woods?
Well, he seems to have a fascination with straws because now he's grasping at straws. I have had so many lifelong conservative voters from the Carleton region reach out to my campaign and say he was voted out because he did not represent them. They gave him multiple opportunities, and he was too busy gunning for the Prime Minister's job, as evidenced by him being in BC last week. Like I said, he's got a fascination with straws because he's grasping right now.
It does make you wonder, how much longer is Pierre Poilievre going to remain leader? There's a lot of different powers at play here. There's the fact that Pierre Poilievre has been able to keep the various factions of the Conservative Party together in a way that Stephen Harper did as well. And that may be his one valuable asset for the party itself. But the fact that this is somebody who clearly is just so after power, and, which of course you could argue is the vast majority of these people, but in a way where, of course, he doesn't care about Battle River Crowfoot. Come on. This vote is happening on August 18th, and he was out in BC recently. Why? Because he doesn't care about the riding, the race. He doesn't care about the people there. He cares about remaining visible in terms of the leader of the Conservative and potentially the next Prime Minister. That's his concern right now. So, the reality is it's going to be an uphill battle because a lot of people, as I said, simply vote for the party, and they have the leader here. They're going to think, hey, isn't it cool to have the leader of the party in our riding? That's cool. Let's vote for him. That's going to be the extent of a lot of people's votes. Unfortunately, that isn't just, a criticism of Battle River Crowfoot. That's generally how people operate. So I think fighting against that's going to be a problem. But if there can be some momentum here for Bonnie Critchley, who knows what's possible?